Hi, I'm going to begin this demo by showing you a bit of my drawing process. I usually start a freehand drawing, just beginning with the eyes and working my way down the face. I know about how big the quick sketch portraits are going to be on the sheets of paper I use, so it's fairly easy to know how big to make these eyes. After a bit, I'm going to check my drawing using an app called Procreate, and I'll show you a bit of that process as well. So doing a drawing looks a little skewed because I've got my pad that I'm drawing on an angle, and you'll see it works out in the end. So I get down, usually don't go quite this far before I check it, but I felt like the drawing was going along okay, so I kept it moving, and now I'm going to check. So I open my Procreate app and navigate to my reference photo, make it a little bit larger. This is uh, my favorite app on the iPad. After I get my reference photo in, I hit the Layers button and add a layer where I'm going to take a photograph of my drawing so far. So I go to the tools, take a photo. Now I have to square my iPad over top of my pictures that I've drawn so far. Often I just throw it on the floor because it's easier to make it more square. And I take a photo, that's what I come up with, and I'm going to say use that photo. You can have a chance to change your mind if you want. I usually just enlarge it right away because I know I need it bigger. Then I hit the opacity and change it to be more that top layer to be more transparent, so I can compare it with the original reference photo. I now need to do the selection tool so that I'm just moving that top layer, which is my drawing. It's a more transparent version of my drawing. And I move it around till I usually line the eyes up, and then I see how everything else looks. The eyes are working pretty well. The nose isn't too bad. Hardest thing with this step is letting go with your fingers because you tend to want to drag that layer with you. It's not turning out too bad, but I can see there are some places where I've kind of messed up. The eye, all right, the mouth is a little bit too high. The nose is a bit skewed. I messed up on the line, the hairline there and the forehead. But now it's really easy to use this as a reference and make those corrections. You can see now I have an overlay that I can look at. You're looking at the Procreate app on the left that has an overlay of my drawing and then the reference underneath. So I'm making the corrections on my actual physical drawing now, where I can see where I needed to move the forehead in a bit, change up the eyebrow. I'll erase my lines, but it's so easy to have that reference in front of me to know how to make those adjustments. Like I said before, it looks a little bit skewed because I have this on an angle. I'll show it to you at the end. Okay, so I'm making my adjustments to the drawing. And fixing the nose up a bit. This is speeded up, I think, about 4 times. Okay, just adding a few more lines in, correcting the nostril. Now, I had to make an adjustment on the nose and the philtrum there, and the mouth was off. It was up too high, so I'm changing that, but it's easy to see from my reference there on Procreate how to adjust that. Adjust the chin a bit. Like I said, I was surprised it was actually pretty accurate. Okay, just erase a few lines there, and that's what I end up with. Now, I continued my drawing. I did this step again, and this phase, I can see that I've made my corrections, and I'm pretty much correct enough that I'll paint it. I do my final drawing sort of like a topographical map. I'm mapping out all the different shadow shapes that I see in the planes of the face. I'll rough these up a little bit later before I start painting though. Okay, now I'm ready to begin to paint, so I'm roughing up my lines a little bit by just passing a kneaded eraser through some of them that I think are too harsh. I'm going to attempt to do this video a little slower than others. Some people have asked me to do them in real time, but this is just speeded up 2 times, so it's gonna feel a little bit slower than my usual videos, but I wanted you to be able to see the strokes. I'm now doing the first pass of burnt sienna shadow shapes using Holbein burnt sienna. And you see I'm very deliberate with my strokes. I make sure I know where the beginning and end of a stroke is going to be. And I do use a lot of water. You can see the pools of water on there. I'm touching some of the edges so that not every edge is a harsh edge, especially at this stage of the game. So I'm just going to be going through, hitting the shadow shapes just with burnt sienna for the initial pass. Doing a little bit on the eyebrow there. I'm not going to talk through this whole thing, so I'm playing some music as well. I am looking at a darker version of this photo so that I could kind of enhance my view, at least, of the shadow shapes. Sometimes the photo's a little bit washed out and you can't really see, so it helps to darken the photo. Because you probably wonder where I'm getting these dark shapes from. When I have a beard or mustache to deal with, I usually do put a pass of burnt sienna underneath because it serves to as a layer underneath to darken it when I do come in with the color of the beard, which is often a bluish color. And when you squint, you really do see those as a value change, so that's why I'm putting that color down. Make sure lines like a smile line are broken up and very subtle, especially on a young person like this. And I put the shadow shapes on the lip too. The upper lip and the left side are pretty much in shadow. Make sure the lip doesn't have harsh edges. I don't want lip liner. Mostly on a guy like this, you're seeing the lower lip defined basically by the shadow shape below the lip. I'm adding in some of the underpainting for the darker areas where the beard will be. I don't think I've ever painted a beard like this before. I was kind of in a quandary, so I just decided to simplify the shapes and merge it together there. I do spend a lot of time on this stage, well, relatively a lot of time, because if I can get the shadow shapes to help me feel like the face is three-dimensional and sculpted, I really feel like most of my work is done and the rest is just kind of gravy. A lot of times I think I should have even left it at this first stage because I liked it better. Touching a few spots on the nose because I didn't want that line to be so harsh. I'm happy to leave a harsh unbroken line at times, but I don't want it to become the star of the show, and so there are times you have to go in and poke a hole, touch the edge. I want to show that his cheeks are sculpted, so I'm going to give a little bit of shading on the side of his face here. in some blue to darken the whites of his eyes. I just used a bit of cobalt blue. If you leave the whites of his eyes, just the white of the paper, they're gonna look very scary. His eyes are like a hazel color, I think. It's hard, photos do lie, but I think that's what I remember. This is my nephew. So I will come in later. I can't put a passive color on them right now. Now, I'm still on my shadow shape phase, but it looks reddish because I've added a little alizarin into my burnt sienna for areas that need to go a bit darker. When it comes to like lines, like the crease of the mouth or the crease behind the eye, I make sure those aren't harsh and unbroken lines, that there's some areas where there's some lost edges. And I'll make sure I come in and soften the upper part of that lip so that it's not a lip liner. So technically, I still call this step 1, where I'm putting in my shadow shapes. But you can see he's becoming a bit more three-dimensional. Sorry you can't see what I'm doing on the ear there, but I'm just putting some of the shadow shapes in the ear area. Try to make my strokes very deliberate. I think about where each stroke is going to begin and where it's going to end, and I don't want to just push paint around once it's on the paper there. There, I'm putting in the crease line, and that's basically just alizarin mixed with burnt sienna. Sometimes if I can't get those lines are the shapes inside the nostrils dark enough, I'll add a little bit of mineral violet, but I didn't at this point yet. Remember to keep the color inside the nostril warm color. Don't use like a dark blue especially on a person with skin like this. It should be like a fleshy, dark flesh color. Still using the burnt sienna alizarin here. Okay, I decided I couldn't live with those starry eyeballs, so the first thing I do is go in with the passive color over the entire iris and pupil area except for where I want to leave the little gleam. I just started with like an olivey green. I'm going to be dropping in some burnt sienna and a little bit of blue too. I won't put the pupil in till later, till this is all dry, or at least almost dry. And the eyebrow. He has a fairly dark eyebrow here, so I'm going in with some indigo to start. I usually don't do the whole eyebrow at once. I usually do it in parts. And you want to touch some of the edges, make sure that it reads as hair, not like a pasted on caterpillar. especially when I touch it from the underside and a few places on top as well. It's lighter over on the left side, so I'm going to just try to put in a few strokes of, I think I'm using mineral violet here. And I also say in my classes that lay down your strokes on the eyebrow in the direction the hair is growing so that it reads as hair. Eyebrows are a chance to play with color. I've got some mineral violet in here, I've got some blue. I don't think I actually have any legit brown. It doesn't read as brown to me, so I think it's a chance to play with some color. Try to darken this shadow on the bottom of his nose and soften a little bit of the underside of the nostril area. Darken a few areas on the neck where there are shadow shapes. Okay, now I'm adding, I'm legit onto step 2, which is adding some arbitrary colors, or colors that wouldn't necessarily be found on a face if you were trying to be really literal. I'm using some quinacridone magenta right now, and I did put in a little pass of peacock blue under the eye there. It'll dry more subtle than this, but just add some entertainment to the face. Of course, if you add a color one place, you need to add it some other places. I guess I'm adding some mineral violet in here now on the eyebrows. I darkened that blue on the whites of the eyes to show that there would be a shadow from the lid. I haven't added eyelashes or anything yet. Adding a little quinacridone magenta to the darker parts of the lip as well. And I'm touching a few places on the upper part of the lip so that it doesn't read as lip liner. A little bit of hooker's green inside the nose area there, on the inner part between the eye and the bridge of the nose. And we've got more hooker's green. This is reading probably stronger than it actually is. You'll see at the end I've kind of enhanced the contrast on this video. When I lay down the arbitrary color, I tend to look for areas that are sort of mid-tones to darker tones. And I sort of have my go-to areas. For the hooker's green particularly, I like it underneath the lip. Just walking my way around the face again, trying to punch up some of the arbitrary color. add a little bit of peacock there. I'm feeling like his cheekbones really aren't defined enough. I'll be going in a little bit later to help with that. I've begun to work a little bit more on at least a part of the hair as I'm moving along with the painting of the face, because I tended to leave it for last before, and I felt it showed that it was sort of an afterthought. So I'm putting just a little bit of the hair over here, because this is my darkest area of the hair, one of the darker areas, and I want to see how it relates to the darks in the face. So I had some burnt umber and indigo, which I love as a combination. This is a quick sketch, so I'm not going to do a lot of detail in the hair, but this kind of hair is really fun to have some chance to play with some strokes. And I touched it with my brush to soften pieces of it so that it wasn't going to call your attention. Okay, so now I'm painting in the pupil. I'm using a little bit of, I used to use just indigo, but now I've gone to using Payne's Gray. And after I paint it in and it dries a bit, I'll touch some of the edges. I just don't want it to read as such a separate rounded shape. I'm dropping in some color around it as well. I thought there was too much contrast between the pupil and the iris. And I usually end up having to go in several times to darken the pupil area. Way easier when this was speeded up four times or 8 times. Speeding up 2 times is not that different than when I'm actually painting it. Yeah, I keep dropping some color into the irises and then taking it out. I felt like you couldn't really understand the way the eyebrows were growing, so I wanted to indicate a few strokes for hairs. It's just some more quinacridone violet, I believe. Notice, as I said earlier, every stroke I lay down is very deliberate. I think about where it's going to begin, where it's going to end. I don't like to paint in a way that softens all the edges. I want to see my strokes. When they're in this arbitrary color phase, they're kind of strange looking, sort of a Christmas tree stage. You see a lot of green and red. Put a bit of more quinacridone on the lip there. Bored yet? Still with me, I guess, if you're listening to this. I'm trying to enhance the feel of that cheekbone. I get a little more three-dimensional feel. Yeah, he's starting to take shape. I'm feeling all right about that. I'm dropping a little more pigment in the pupil. Looks weird right now, but it'll dry much later. Yes, and I just can't help but fiddle a little there. I'm going to add the eyelashes in a little bit. Decided to put a little bit of a pinkish color up around his eye, under his eye there. Okay, now eyelash time. I actually didn't start with a brown. I never use anything black. Well, I shouldn't say never, but not usually. I think I'm actually using some mineral violet here. The eyelashes are reading darker, but his hair is brown, so they're probably just brown. I'm using some mineral violet and trying to kind of clump some shapes together, not make them read as separate, organized little lashes like a fake lash would be. But he does have fairly long lashes, and I like to paint them in the way that they're growing from the skin there. This kind of adds a finishing touch there. A few eyelashes over here. Like I said, mineral violet, I might have gone in with a little bit of burnt umber too to darken them. I should make a slow and a fast version of this video for those who can't take watching every stroke. Decided to add a little bit of quinacridone coral to his lips. I'd be careful with it, but it's a fairly light pass. Now, believe it or not, I'm actually adding the flesh tones. My go-to flesh tones are mix of vermilion and Winsor Yellow Deep. I don't mix it up ahead of time. I just grab either on the orange side or the yellow side of what I tend to want it for. And you notice these are very deliberate strokes, just as my other strokes are, because I want the strokes to have energy, and I want the strokes to also help sculpt the face. So I try to put down the stroke in a way that's going to echo the structure, like a bone structure or the way hair grows or whatever. Sorry you got a glare here. I'm deliberately trying to leave the sparkle of the white of the paper in places. I always love this phase because it sort of brings them to life, breathes some life into them. I'm making sure I don't cover up all those white areas. I'm adding some color to the left side of the hair now, just some burnt umber and a bit of indigo to kind of see how that color looks against the face. I'm not done with the face though. I haven't dealt with the beard and mustache area yet, and I need to work on the bone structure a little bit, so I'll go in with some more color. Sorry you can't see what I'm doing. I didn't realize that this was out of the range of the camera at the moment, so you're not seeing me paint the top of his hair. So just imagine. Yep, that's where I realized my camera placement. You have to make sure when you've got hair growing out from the forehead, like on the top, that you soften the spots where it's actually growing from the forehead, because otherwise it's going to look like a helmet. Okay, I'm adding in some burnt umber to give a little bit darker feel to the beard. I'll be adding in a little bit of blue later on. Oh, there I am, adding the indigo, just a very light wash. And I came back in a couple times with some blue to make it darker. I was afraid to go too dark. But making the strokes echo the way that the beard hair is growing, kind of simplifying the shapes. He is a handsome guy. They're adding some more indigo. Just trying to get the darker mustache shapes in. Making sure to soften some of those areas so it doesn't look pasted on. I made him look a little, I think I made that mustache a little too dark there, but it will dry later. There's a bit of a darker hairy area there under the lip. Okay, I really felt that the cheek didn't have enough definition, so I put in some strokes here on the cheek to help that. There, that one. That was the one that did it. I put that splotch of green on between the nose and the cheek, and I got a little harsh, but I will come in and soften it up a bit. Okay, so, and I'm touching the edge of the iris where the iris meets the white of the eye to soften that a bit. It was a harsh line. Give the nose a bit more structure. I'm putting that passive flesh tone on just now on the nose, tone down that green area that I had put in that spot. So I know it really looks red. Like I said, I bumped up the contrast on this video, so it won't look that red at the end. It looks like a clown right now. I'm adding a bit of quinacridone coral to some highlights, places that are normally a little warmer. Kind of a magical color. And I keep adding more blue into that beard area. I don't want it all even looking, just putting it in spots. You can tell when I'm leaning in, you can see my shadow over top of this paper. I'm really almost done with the face, just a few more strokes there, and I need to do it with the hair. I put a little bit of just pure Winsor Yellow Deep in some spots. I felt like you needed some yellow. And just, I'm not going to do much with the hair. I'm adding a little bit of raw sienna for the lighter areas, and I'll be using mostly burnt umber and indigo. I don't want to fiddle much with it. I'm going to leave it as a sketch. It usually takes me about an hour and a half from beginning to end, from drawing to finishing the painting. The reason I'm doing these quick sketches is to make painting a portrait not so daunting, to try out different colors, to try out different ideas before I try them on a more finished painting. And the more you do these quick sketches, the more comfortable you are with doing a more involved painting. I know that doing these has changed the way I structure my more finished paintings. My strokes are a lot more deliberate. My color choices have changed. Got to get some of that curly hair stuff in from the side. Oh, bit of cobalt blue up there. Started feeling like I needed to finish this up, so we're almost there. Adding a bit of indigo. With quick sketches, I don't go back in later to fiddle with them, make something right. I usually just post them immediately on Facebook, and then it's too late. I'm not going to do anything. I felt I needed a little more contrast between the hair behind his beard, so I did go in with some indigo and some burnt umber.